In the endless blue skies over the Pacific Ocean during World War II, thousands of young men flew into combat knowing they might never return. Bombers burned, fighters exploded, and the ocean below swallowed both wreckage and bodies without mercy. But among those airmen, there was one gunner whose name spread in whispers because what he did made no sense, broke the rules, and yet turned him into one of the most lethal defensive gunners of the entire Pacific War. His fellow crewmen laughed at him. His officers warned him. Some even called him stupid. But when Japanese fighters closed in, when tracer fire tore through the sky, and when death came screaming toward the bomber formation, this gunner survived again and again and again. This is the true wartime story of how one B-24 Liberator gunner used a so-called stupid ammo trick that rewrote the rules of aerial combat and made him the deadliest gunner the Pacific had ever seen. The B-24 Liberator was a powerful bomber, but it was also unforgiving. Faster than the B-17 and capable of carrying massive bomb loads, it earned respect and fear from the men who flew inside it. The aircraft had thin skin, fuel tanks spread across its wings, and long, vulnerable fuselage sections that enemy fighters loved to tear apart. In the Pacific, B-24 crews faced something even worse than flak. Highly skilled Japanese fighter pilots flying Zeros, Oscars, and Tonys. These pilots knew exactly how to attack bombers. They aimed for engines, cockpits, and tail gunners. And once a B-24 went down, survival over the ocean was rare. For gunners, every mission felt like sitting in a glass bubble waiting to be shot. The gunner at the center of this story wasn't famous. He wasn't a top graduate. He wasn't aggressive or loud. He was just another young airman assigned to a .50 caliber position, one of many men expected to defend the bomber at all costs. But from the beginning, something about him bothered the others. During training, while other gunners carefully followed ammunition loading procedures, this man did something different. He mixed his ammo belts in strange patterns. Instead of standard tracer armor-piercing sequences, he rearranged rounds in ways instructors had never taught. Other gunners mocked him. "That'll jam your gun. That's pointless. That's stupid." Even his crew questioned him. But he never argued. He just said one thing: "Trust me. I want them to see death coming." Standard .50 caliber belts followed predictable patterns. Tracers helped gunners aim, but they also revealed position and timing. Japanese pilots had learned to read tracer fire. They knew when to dodge, when to roll, when to dive. This gunner understood something others didn't. Instead of evenly spacing tracer rounds, he clustered them. Long stretches of invisible fire, followed by sudden bursts of bright tracer chaos. To enemy pilots, it looked like he was missing, until it was too late. They would fly straight into invisible death. By the time tracers appeared, the bullets were already inside the aircraft. The first combat mission tested everything. As the B-24 formation crossed enemy-held islands, Zeros rose from the clouds like sharks from deep water. They attacked fast, confident, and aggressive. The gunner waited. Other gunners opened fire early, tracers streaking across the sky. Japanese pilots adjusted instantly. But when one Zero lined up, behind the Liberator, thinking the gunner wasn't firing, he squeezed the trigger. No tracers, no warning. The Zero suddenly erupted in smoke and fire. The enemy pilot never even tried to evade. Silence filled the intercom. Then someone shouted, "Did you see that?" After that mission, something changed. Japanese fighters began avoiding that section of the formation. Pilots broke off attacks early. Some even fired from extreme range, wasting ammunition rather than getting close. Intelligence later revealed why. Enemy pilots believed one B-24 had a ghost gun, a weapon that fired without tracers, a gunner who couldn't be read. Fear, real fear, entered the equation, and fear kills. Aerial combat wasn't just about firepower. It was psychology. Tracers gave pilots rhythm. They taught them timing. Remove that rhythm, and you removed confidence. The gunner's invisible bullet streams forced attackers to guess, and guessing at 300 miles per hour meant death. His guns didn't jam. His accuracy improved. His survival rate skyrocketed. By mid-tour, his confirmed kills exceeded numbers rarely seen from defensive gunners. On one mission, the formation was jumped by more than 20 fighters. Bombers burned. Men screamed over the radio. A Japanese fighter lined up head-on. The gunner waited longer than anyone thought possible. At the last second, he fired. The fighter disintegrated in front of the cockpit. Debris slammed into the bomber, but the crew lived. That day, the pilot said one sentence after landing: "That stupid trick saved all our lives." By the end of the war, the gunner went home quietly. No parades. No medals worthy of his kill count. No headlines. But among bomber crews, his legend lived on. Later training manuals quietly adjusted ammo doctrine. Tracer patterns changed. Lessons were learned. But his name remained mostly unknown. As the war in the Pacific intensified, missions became longer and deadlier. Japanese air defenses improved, and their pilots adapted quickly. They learned bomber formation, studied gun arcs, and exploited blind spots with terrifying precision. What had once been scattered attacks turned into coordinated ambushes. On one mission over heavily defended territory, the B-24 formation was hit harder than ever before. Flak bursts shook the aircraft violently. Engines coughed. Smoke filled the cabin. Over the intercom, voices overlapped, some calm, some panicked. Then the fighters came. They attacked from above, below, and straight through the formation. It was chaos. Bombers began falling out of the sky one by one, and this time, they were coming directly for his bomber. While others fired wildly, the gunner stayed calm. He had learned something critical after dozens of missions. Panic wasted ammunition, revealed position, and invited death. He didn't spray bullets. He waited. He watched. He measured distance by instinct alone. A Japanese fighter dove in fast, guns blazing. The pilot believed the gunner was out of range. He was wrong. Invisible rounds ripped through the fighter's engine. The plane rolled violently, clipped a wing, and vanished into the clouds below. Another followed. Same result. The crew stopped shouting. They stopped doubting. They trusted him completely now. Aerial combat was brutal not just because of speed, but because of distance. Pilots and gunners rarely saw faces. They killed shapes, shadows, silhouettes against the sun. But the gunner understood something deeper. Enemy pilots weren't machines. They were young men like him, trained, brave, but human. And humans reacted to fear faster than logic. By hiding his fire, by denying tracers, he denied information. No warning, no correction, no escape. Every burst became final. Eventually, statistics could not be ignored. Mission reports showed something impossible. One B-24 consistently survived engagements that destroyed others. Enemy fighters disengaged earlier. Attacks lost coordination. And every time intelligence officers reviewed gun camera footage, the same pattern appeared. Enemy aircraft flew confidently until they suddenly died. Command summoned the crew. They asked questions. They checked the guns. They inspected ammunition belts. When they discovered the ammo pattern, reactions were mixed. Some officers were furious. Others were silent. But one senior commander said quietly, "Whatever he's doing, it works." Word spread fast. Other gunners tried copying the trick, but many failed. They misunderstood the balance. Too few tracers meant poor aiming. Too many defeated the purpose. The gunner had perfected the pattern through experience, not theory. He warned others. This isn't about hiding fire. It's about timing. Those who learned properly improved their survivability. Those who didn't paid the price. The trick wasn't magic. It was discipline. Late in the war, during a high-risk bombing run deep into enemy territory, the gunner faced his closest call. A fighter approached from dead astern, fast, aggressive, experienced. This pilot didn't dodge. He didn't flinch. He kept coming. The gunner fired. Nothing happened. The gun jammed. Seconds stretched into eternity. The fighter opened fire. Bullets shredded the tail section. Alarms screamed. With shaking hands, the gunner cleared the jam. One burst. Short, silent. The fighter exploded so close the bomber rocked violently. The crew survived, but barely. After landing, the gunner sat alone for a long time, staring at his hands. Even legends fear death. When the war finally ended, there was no dramatic farewell. The gunner packed his gear. He shook hands. He walked away from the aircraft that had carried him through hell. Back home, no one asked how many men he had killed. No one wanted details. The world wanted peace. And he gave it silence. Years later, historians reviewing Pacific air combat noticed anomalies. Defensive gunner effectiveness varied wildly, but one pattern stood out. Unpredictable fire saved lives. Modern air combat training quietly adopted similar principles. Tracers were rethought. Doctrine evolved. But the origin story was rarely mentioned. One gunner, One stupid idea. One sky filled with invisible bullets. Years after the war, surviving crew members were interviewed. Time had aged their faces, but not their memories. When asked about flak, fear, or losses, they spoke carefully. But when his name came up, their tone changed. He wasn't loud. He wasn't brave in a loud way. He just understood the sky. They remembered how he checked his ammo belts obsessively before every mission, how he cleaned his guns longer than anyone else, how he never celebrated kills, only survival. To them, he wasn't a legend. He was the reason they made it home. As daylight missions became too costly, the Pacific Air War shifted. Night bombing increased. Darkness removed visibility, but it also removed safety. Enemy fighters attacked using shadows. Flak bursts appeared without warning. Navigation errors sent bombers into storms or mountains. At night, tracers were even more dangerous. Every glowing round screamed, "Here I am." The gunner adjusted again. He reduced tracers even further. Now his gunfire was nearly invisible. Enemy pilots fired blindly while he fired with certainty. Captured Japanese pilots were questioned late in the war. Most spoke cautiously, but a few mentioned something strange. A bomber that killed without warning. A gunner whose fire could not be seen. A section of the formation they refused to attack twice. They didn't know his name. They didn't know his trick. But they remembered the fear. Fear made even experienced pilots hesitate, and hesitation was fatal. For all his success, the gunner carried something heavy. Each burst meant a life ended. Each explosion meant someone else never going home. At night, lying in his bunk, he replayed moments. Not the kills, but the faces he never saw. He never spoke of this to his crew. In war, silence was survival. But the weight followed him home. Many tried to imitate his method. Few succeeded. Because the trick wasn't just ammunition. It was restraint. Most gunners fired too early, too long, too emotionally. He fired late, short, decisive.